Hello, my name is Stuart Garvey and welcome to the State of Scottish Football here on the excellent A State of Mind network. We are currently live across Facebook, Twitch, Twitter and YouTube, meaning there are plenty of ways for you to get involved, especially in the comments. We'd love to hear from you throughout the show. If you wish to be entered into the A State of Mind's monthly prize draw giveaway, then be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. August's prize is a multi-platinum BPI award that was presented to John Fratelli for 600,000 sales of the Fratelli's debut album, Castello Music. Good prize. I'm not usually here on a Wednesday though, but I am filling in for Sean tonight, so you're unfortunately stuck with me. But I'm not alone, as you can see. I'm joined by Ayrshire's finest, Jack Donnelly. Jack, how are you doing?
I will absolutely take that title every day of the week. I wouldn't get that kind of praise when I'm on with Sean, of course, big Kelly fan he is, but I'm doing excellently, mate. I'm delighted to have you here with me on a Wednesday to talk about all the goings on in the beautiful game up here in Scotland. It's going to be a good time.
It's going to be fantastic. Well, we'll jump straight into it with a little bit of gossip. Not too many stories today. We've got 6 European ties to discuss later on, but we'll start with Josip Juranovic, who the manager of Legia Warsaw has come out today and said that Celtic have agreed a fee. I believe 2.5 million is the one I've seen most written about. So how impressive a signing do you think this could be for Celtic to finally have a talented right back? Obviously, Tony Ralston has made a good start to the season, but I think the general opinion is he's not quite up to the standard that Celtic need to be at the moment.
That's been the opinion of a lot of people on Ralston. I think they always saw him as more of a competent backup to a more established right back in the Celtic team. But I didn't know an awful lot about this guy, so I looked into him a little bit, and he won the league with Legia Warsaw last year in Poland. So he's coming in off the back of a league-winning campaign as part of the most solid defence, having conceded the fewest goals in the division, 24 goals shipped in 30 games. He played 40 times for Warsaw last season. He scored once and got 10 assists, so he was assisting once every 4 games, which isn't too bad a return for the right back. And of course, everyone in Scotland had a little bit of a chance to see him in action because he played the full 90 for Croatia against us at the Euros this summer. He played the full 90 in that upsetting win for Croatia. I'd imagine everyone's going to be in agreement on that. So for $2.5 million, it's probably a fairly decent bit of business. He seems quite defensively resolute and can contribute going forward, which with Ange Postecoglou's overlapping fullbacks and inverted fullbacks rather, is something he's going to be looking for. He's looking for contributions at both ends of the pitch, I'd imagine. So pretty smart bit of business from what I can tell.
Definitely. I don't like to be reminded of that result in the Euros, to be perfectly honest. I like to forget that game ever existed. I'll remember Callum McGregor's goal. I won't forget anything else that occurred. But of course, he's played alongside Arthur Borich as well, ex-Celtic goalkeeper. He's maybe told him a few things about the club, so there's possibly a wee connection there. I personally think it's a really good signing. You know, as you say, I've not really seen him play for Croatia, but as you say, his stats for Legia Warsaw are excellent. And a winning mentality, I think that's vital for what Celtic need to buy. You know, I think, you always say the classic, you can buy quality, but you can never buy experience. And I think that's exactly what he has there built up for the club. But the other name that we've mentioned in the title there is not somebody leaving, it's somebody who's actually confirmed to be staying at a club, and it was Martin Boyle. Me and Sean spoke extensively last night about the potential move to Aberdeen, but Martin Boyle has signed a new contract at Hibs until 2024, I believe, is with no release clause in this one. There was one in his previous for clubs down south of £500,000, so good wee chunk of cash there, but now he's committed his future to Hibs. How big of a I'm going to call it a signing here. How big of a signing is this for Hibs?
It's absolutely massive, Stu. I don't think you can understate it. I think Boyle is easily one of the top two players at Hibs. Between him and Nisbet, they're probably the 2 best players at the club. So being able to secure his services until for another year on top of what he had in his current deal, I think it's just a 1-year extension, if I'm right. I think his previous deal ran until 2023. So having him for another year is absolutely massive. And I don't really think it was ever in doubt that he would be leaving Hibs to go to somewhere else in Scotland, because you look at it in a bit more detail. Obviously, his wife Rachel, we know from our time working with Hibs Women, she's there. And there was a lot of people saying, oh, well, if Martin Boyle moves up to Aberdeen, Rachel might move as well. But if you looked at it that way, Aberdeen are just coming up to SWPL 1, having won the league last year in SWPL 2. So it would be a bit of a backward step if that was a mentality they were going for. It's it could be encouraged if Rachel wanted to come back to Aberdeen, where she signed for Hibs from. But no, it made perfect sense for them to get this deal done and just ward off any suitors, because I think if people could have seen were interested in the clubs, if a release clause available to them and them alone that they could have potentially taken advantage of, because I'd probably say Boyle's worth more than 500,000. I'm sure you as a Hibs fan would definitely agree with that.
Add one more zero onto that, and then we'll talk. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic deal from Hibs, and I think it's settled a lot of nerves. A lot of people were worried about the situation with the club obviously being knocked out of Europe and then potentially losing the best player. Definitely had fans worried, especially just at the start of the season, of course. But to see Boyle has stayed at the club, I think a lot of people were questioning Hibs' determination, their mentality, and what they want to achieve. I think this speaks volumes, the fact that they've managed to keep this spot stay. And Boyle himself is happy because I think he could play for any team in Scotland. I think he's good enough, and I think he could play for a number of teams down south. So fantastic business from Hibs. But switching over to the other half of Edinburgh, Ben Woodburn is very close to a move to Hearts. Me and Sean spoke about this one as well last night. Sean and I should say, rather. But it's a bit of an interesting one because not many people know what to make of Ben Woodburn. Obviously, coming from Liverpool, it's a prestigious club. But at the same time, he's not quite set the world alight on his loans to the likes of Oxford and Sheffield United. What are your thoughts on this transfer?
It is an interesting one, as you say. I mean, where was he last season? Was it Blackpool he was at last season?
Blackpool on loan,
I think he scored 13 goals, if I'm correct. So I've got a fairly decent return for a loan spell. I mean, he's just 21, if I'm right. So still got years and years ahead of him in the game. And he really did kind of burst onto the scene when he started at Liverpool. I think he came in very young. I think got his first appearance at the age of 16. And then he got drafted into Wales setup very, very quickly as well. So he's a player of obvious talent and one that Hearts could definitely do with adding to their squad because, again, it's the lack of depth out wide for Hearts, I think, that they really could be adding to. And I think it'd be a smart bit of business if they do get him in. But it is that big if at the moment, isn't it, Struan? Because it all kind of seemed like it was going to happen last night and it was all coming through that he was keen on the move, he'd agreed the terms, and it was just a matter of time before he would be up in the capital. But things have kind of hit a bit of a snag, haven't they?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be going as smoothly as people would suggest. A lot of Liverpool fans as well are not too worried about this transfer. I think a lot of them don't expect him to get much game time, but he's in the last year of his contract, so it's potentially one of those where he sort of needs to show clubs what he can do, how he can play. Otherwise, it's going to be a pretty difficult situation to find a club, even if on a free. So it's a tough one to say. I think Hearts, looking at it from a Hearts point of view, Sean mentioned last night how Hearts have got a lot of talent up front, and he might not even get into that Hearts team. Do you think it's a player that Hearts really need, or do you think it's one of those where he's kind of coming on reputation alone and not necessarily a player that Hearts actually need to improve their squad?
It is a good question about that, and I mean, it might just be the reputation because, I mean, you look at him just now and it's really down to Jurgen Klopp whether he stays or goes, and Klopp's apparently spoken to him and said he wants to keep him for longer in the window because I think he said he was going to plan on potentially using him in games later in August against Burnley and Chelsea. So obviously the manager of his parent club sees him as a very talented player, so it's his reputation is behind him. But I suppose he has made an impact. He had a good spell last season, so I think his numbers are kind of showing for him that he would probably be quite effective up here in Scotland. And it's a tough one because I think it could be good cover because we know how injury prone Josh Ginnelly can be and how much the season he kind of missed last year when he looked probably really, really good on paper and then missed a fair bit of the season through injury. So almost having that just safety net of a talented youngster coming through, whereas you would probably have Ginnelly as a starter, is probably a smart idea from Nielsen and Hearts.
I think as well the fact that at Liverpool they've got the two best wingers in the Premier League at the moment.
They do,
I just don't see how he's any avenue for him to get into that team, to be perfectly honest. But I'd like to see him come to Scotland. I mean, I think a lot of people would possibly say he'll light up the league. I think it's a little more difficult than some people would make out. But it's definitely a transfer I'd like to see just to see how he plays. To be honest, there's a lot of hype around this one, and I'd just like to see how he gets on. But the last transfer that we'll mention is Juninho Bacuna. I'm struggling to say that name, and I really shouldn't be. The Huddersfield midfielder is very close to a move to Rangers, and Steven Gerrard actually mentioned today, saying that Rangers were very close to signing this one. What do you make of this signing? Because I don't know if midfield is exactly where I would be looking at that Rangers team to improve at the moment. Obviously, John Lundstrom's come in on a free, and although he did score in the emphatic one against Pars at the weekend, I don't think he's quite hit the ground running in the way that many people would have hoped.
But I mean, you look at the area of the pitch. I mean, that you said it yourself. It's not really the area you would be expecting Rangers to strengthen. And I mean, just listing off a couple of names: Glenn Kamara, Joe Aribo, Stephen Davis, John Lundstrom, Ryan Jack, even youngsters like Stephen Kelly. And I suppose if you want to bring the wider players into it, you've got Scott Arfield and Yanis Hadji who can play centrally or out wide as well. So that's 8 different names I've just said there. And they're looking to bring in another midfielder. So it's a bit of an odd approach, but he's got Premier League experience. I think he played 21 times for Huddersfield during their one season up in the Premier League under David Wagner. So he does have that pedigree, I suppose you can say, but he kind of seems to have lost his way a little bit. Of course, he kind of seemed to do really well before he moved to England at Groningen over in his native Netherlands. So he seems to have a bit of a reputation back home as a decent player. And I think he's 24, if I'm correct in saying, 24 years old. So potentially about to hit onto his prime years. And look, if Rangers can get a good deal for him, then fair play, because I think a lot of people kind of see him. He's quite forward-thinking as an attacking midfielder, and he's got a really good engine on him, so plenty of running in the middle of the park for Steven Gerrard and Rangers if they do secure the services. But it's whether they can get a decent deal, because he only does have a year left in his contract, so you would imagine that they might be able to get him for a little bit cheaper than they would have done last summer when they were still reportedly interested in him. So interested to see how it does turn out, but I'm not really sure it's the area that Rangers should be targeting to strengthen.
Yeah, it's one of those transfers where no matter how good a player he is, you always have to ask, do Rangers need him? Will he come into this team? And I think it's always going to be one of the difficult ways to judge him, because I don't think I don't know too much about him. I followed him, but I think the Rangers midfield is strong, to be honest. I don't think he would walk into that midfield. And at the same time, I think there's other areas, especially if there are still players to leave Rangers, especially after losing the Champions League. But speaking of the Champions League, we've had one result finished and one is currently ongoing in the Women's Champions League at the moment. Glasgow City picked up a 3-0 victory over Barkira Ara, a Malta team from Malta. Sorry,
Birkirkara, I think. There you go.
I absolutely butchered that. The goals from Claire Shine, Priscilla Chinchilla, Vital Katz gave them a 3-0 victory earlier on. How impressive was this victory for Glasgow City? Of course, the current champions of the SWPL.
Well, I think I'm not sure whether it was all too impressive. It's certainly the professional result, because the way that worked, I think the way that the Women's Champions League work in each team, you're in a group at the moment. You've got 4 teams in your group, and the highest seed out of your group, or the highest ranked team, plays the games at home. So everything's been happening at Broadwood for Glasgow City, since out of their 4, they're the highest ranked team. So a good way to kind of start things just before the start of the SWPL season in the next couple of weeks, in the final against one of BIIK Kazigurt, potentially a Kazakhstan team, or Slovan Bratislava from Slovakia. I think the last I checked, BIIK were 1-0 up on Bratislava. That game's probably finished now, so we can probably just do a double check on how that did end up. So City do have their team locked in for who they're going to be playing Saturday night, but I think it's a good result, especially for Grant Scott, who's interim head coach at the moment. They're still looking for someone to replace Scott Booth on a permanent basis. Of course, he moved down south over the summer. Grant Scott, good guy to have at the helm. Of course, we kind of know him a little bit from our time at Hibs Women, one of the good guys up here in women's football in Scotland. So good to see him doing well. And I think it's a good chance for some of these players, especially the kind of newer signings from City, to kind of have their first taste of Champions League football, European football. So yeah, definitely the good result, and it's hopefully something that they can build on, because I think should they win this Sunday, on the Saturday, that's going to be the end of round 1 of qualification. Then 11 teams from qualification rounds will go into the second round, joined by another 3 direct entries that are going to be competing for 7 group stage places. So half the teams are going to be going through, and you would have to hope that City manage to be one of the teams that make it through in that passageway anyway.
We've had good results in the Champions League in recent seasons, but you touched there on the interim boss. Grant Scott, of course, came in for Scott Booth and moved to Birmingham City. At the end of the game, Grant Scott said he was happy with the result, but he wasn't best pleased with the performance. He was a little bit frustrated, even though they won 3-0. I think that can speak volumes. Quite often you see that with a manager where even though they win the game, they're not happy with the performance. Do you think that shows the mentality of this team? Because obviously they're used to dominating women's football over here. How much this competition means to them, that even though he's won, they still want to see more from the players? How important do you think that can be from a coach?
Well, the thing is, City have always been an ambitious club. Even forming them, they wanted to be their own club, disassociated from either of the old firm clubs in Glasgow, to be able to have a women's team that is solely its own. Of course, they are a women's team. There isn't a Glasgow City men's side. So they stand as their own entity as a women's team, which is a fairly ambitious thing to do to begin with, especially such a old firm dominated city like Glasgow. So they've been ambitious from their formation, and that just kind of speaks volumes of their ambition going forward into Europe. I mean, it was only a couple of seasons ago that they made the finals, I think, and they were playing at Wolfsburg, who went on to win it, if I'm right. I could be completely wrong with that. I don't know how the latter stage of that competition finished, but it was something along those lines. So I'm not really too surprised to hear him kind of demanding more or looking for more from his players. And I don't know whether it's just him trying to get them a bit more G'd up for the Saturday final, or whether he's just setting down a marker for the rest of the season. But it's certainly a good mentality to have, especially when the club want to remain ambitious and competitive in Europe going forward.
Well, you might not be too pleased with the performance, but Clear Shine's goal was absolutely excellent. I'd advise anyone to check it out. It was the very first one. But just talking about the ambitions, just to sum up this point, how important can a European run be for Glasgow City?
I think it could definitely be important. I think they want to become an established side in Europe. We've seen that over the last couple of seasons or so. So I think any sort of good run, if they get into the group stage, is brilliant. If they get beyond that, even better. So I think we want to be able to prove, as we do with the men's sides in Scotland, that Scottish football's no joke. We want to be taken seriously. We want to be deservedly at the table with the kind of bigger leagues around Europe. So I wouldn't really be surprised if we do see them get to the group stages, because that is such an important adventure for them. They're not only kind of flying the flag for themselves, but they're flying the flag for Scotland as well. And absolutely good luck to them. We hopefully see them succeed as much as possible in Europe.
Well, we'd love to see them do well in Europe. But another team who kicked off at 5 o'clock, Celtic, making their debut in the UEFA Women's Champions League, are currently 1-0 down at halftime. I'm not sure what's happened in the second half so far. Hopefully people can let us know in the comments. But it wasn't the best of halves for Celtic. They did concede a penalty. Chloe Logan was able to save it, but they did unfortunately fall 1-0 down to Sandy Tolete of Levante. Levante are no mean outfit, of course. They finished third in the Premier Division. Very good side to come up against. Mm-hmm. How significant is this for a club like Celtic? Because obviously we've seen recently that the old firm clubs, Celtic and Rangers, have put a lot more into their women's teams recently. And to see Celtic now in the UEFA Women's Champions League, how good is this for the coefficient?
You're not going to be too happy to know that 7 minutes ago Levante did actually double their lead.
Is it 2-0 now?
So it's 2-0 to the Spaniards, unfortunately. I'll just read out the tweet from Celtic FC Women on Twitter. Goal Levante as the Spaniards slice across into the path of Ferrer, who sends it into the back of the net. So not the best position to be in at the moment, but I think it's to go back to your question, Stuart, it's a marker for what Celtic want to be able to do with their women's side. Of course, we saw much more investment over the past couple of seasons and want to build the women's team up a profile of their own, which I think they've really been successful in doing so, finishing second in qualifying for the Champions League for the first time. And Fran Alonso's got a lot to do with that. He's come in, he's been nothing short of passionate. I think that's the one word you can use to describe Fran Alonso to no end. And he's absolutely well within his right to be so passionate, because the team have been able to do so well domestically, and I've now had the chance to go and compete on the continent. And while it's not going their way tonight, I'm sure it's not going to be their last venture into Europe in the next few years or so. I wouldn't be surprised to see them back in the competition soon.
Yeah, Fran Alonso has done an absolutely fantastic job with Celtic. I'm sure a lot of viewers of this channel have been keeping up with them and just seen how successful they were last season, of course, to finish second. And as I mentioned previously, Levante are a very good side. They finished third over there in Spain. They're expected favourites for this game. To save a penalty as well for Chloe Logan is absolutely massive. But I think it's a bit difficult to say now given the scoreline and the timing. But do you think Celtic can get anything from this match? Do you think it's possibly a step too far?
It's tough to say, because you've only really got half an hour to do it and get 2 goals. So it's not exactly the best timing. But we've seen fight back from a lot of teams in the SWPL won a lot of last season. So there's nothing to suggest that they can't at least get 1 goal back. And if they get the 1 goal quite soon, then who's to say they can't go on and get a second, spur them on and properly give it everything until the final whistle, which I'd imagine Fran Alonso's going to be pushing his side to do. So who knows? You would like to see it anyway. You always want to see, even as a non-Old Firm fan, you want to see all the clubs doing very well in Europe, especially when the Old Firm are the most prominent figures in those competitions. So hopefully they manage to get something out of the game. But the more it goes on, the less likely it's going to be, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's a bit gutting to hear that they have fallen 2-0 down at this point, but you never know. Miracles happen in football. It could be a 3-2 victory in the end of the day. That's what I'll
keep the feed up, and I'll keep you updated throughout the night, because the game's going to finish before we do. So yeah, I'll let you know if there's anything happening. We can go mental over a 3-2 turnaround in the next 20 minutes or so. That would be quite something.
That'd be the greatest thing to have happened on the state of Scottish football, a 3-2 turnaround there. But we'll switch over to the other Celtic team who are playing AZ Alkmaar later on tonight. Another good side who finished third in the Eredivisie. Celtic love playing teams who finish third in their domestic league. This is quite a fun coincidence there. But given recent results to Celtic, 16 goals in their last 4 games, should they be going into this game with a renewed sense of confidence, especially after the start that they made?
I think that's exactly true. I mean, everything seems to be kind of glowing a bit of positivity around about Celtic just now. I mean, Postecoglou's come in and the fans have really taken to him. He's been honest. He's been a bit refreshing just to kind of... After the Neil Lennon tenure of last season, where it was all a bit of doom and gloom and there wasn't really any sort of truth to a lot of what was being said. I mean, coming in and you've got everything Postecoglou says, you can take at face value, and that's something that the fans definitely appreciate after the last year or so. The signings have come in, and while Starfelt potentially hasn't had the easiest start to life in Scotland, Kyogo Furuhashi has been the complete opposite. He's took to Scotland like a duck to water. He's been absolutely electric ever since he stepped out in green and white for the first time, and I'm really excited to see how he progresses in the season going forward. You've got the signings coming in. I mean, he's already said, Postecoglou, that they are close to a couple of names. You've obviously got Juranovic flying over at the weekend to complete his medical and the move, so he'll be ready kind of for next week, starting at some point, which is going to be really good to see. But you would have to potentially look at them as, I don't know if I'd want to say favourites, because there's probably a few kind of glaring misses with Alkmaar at the moment. They lost their main man and star striker, Myron Boadu, to Borussia Dortmund fairly recently, so they're lacking that same element of firepower that probably led them to third in the Eredivisie last season. And fans of Scottish football might remember a certain Joel Pereira from his Hearts days, and Alkmaar actually failed to score past him in the last week in a game that they played. So that's probably even more of a confidence booster than everything surrounding Celtic at the moment.
If you need anything, just go by that. Any fans of Scottish football can go by that one. I've spoken about how good the Celtic attack has been. You mentioned there Starfelt coming in and the new right back. The right back, Juranovic, isn't going to be coming in for this game, obviously. It's nowhere near close enough. So do you think there are still worries over the Celtic defence? It'd be interesting to see whether McCarthy gets the nod tonight, because I feel he can make a real difference. But whether he starts or not, with the centre-back partnership, do you think there could be a few worries? Especially, even though AZ Alkmaar have lost their main man, that Celtic defence it's been proved it can be torn apart.
I just want to touch on it. I did make a bit of a mistake. Robert in the comments rightly pointing out that Boadu went to Monaco and not Dortmund. I was thinking of Doniel Malen, his national team counterpart, and Malen was at PSV.
Yeah,
PSV,
he
there
came
you go.
in
So
straight after Sancho left. That was like one of those where as soon as the Sancho money came in, it was instantly
straight
on Doniel Malen.
Yeah, just absolutely
straight replacement.
Yeah, so apologies for that one. Boadu did indeed go to Monaco. Thank you, Robert, for keeping me right. I think until there is a few more signings, I think the Celtic defence is always going to be coming into question, Struan. And I suppose rightly so, because it has seemed culpable even at the most dominant performance. You saw it over Hearts. I mean, they were absolutely cruising in that first half. It was complete and utter domination after 45 minutes. And then the defence kind of went to sleep for the first goal. Starfelt kind of gave an easy route through and then fouled Boyce for the penalty. I think it was Boyce he fouled, or it might have been Ginelli. I can't remember exactly, but just slightly as a suspect. But I suppose it's Europe where Celtic have really been able to put on their biggest of shows. I mean, over the 2 legs against Jablonec, they were absolutely unstoppable. There was not a chance they were going to let anything go away. And even then, in the first leg, they still conceded 2 fairly easy goals. So Alkmaar might take a bit of confidence in that, but Celtic might take the confidence that can go by the way of, if you score 2, we'll score 3. It might be that viewpoint, which it's worked for them so far. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it work again.
Moving up to the top of the pitch with Celtic, we've seen Kyogo Furuhashi, who's been the signing of the season, except Jake Doyle-Hayes, of course. But he's been absolutely excellent for Celtic so far. Me and Sean and I were saying last night, he's not had a bad game in a Celtic shirt, really, to be honest. But what I found interesting at Hearts was that Odsonne Edouard, the man who I think a lot of fans just expected to leave Scotland this season, looks like he's going to be staying now. And the two of them actually played together against Hearts. Do you think that's something that we could see going forward? Because if Celtic are going to concede goals, you'd want as much firepower up front as you can, just to outscore a team almost.
That's the thing. I mean, if you've got Furuhashi, who I think he said in the fan conference with the guys at a Celtic State of Mind that he probably sees himself primarily as a striker rather than out on the wing. So if you can have him and Edward as a partnership with Ryan Christie sitting in behind, title winning attack, to be quite honest with you. I don't want to go too much into it, but it might be slightly reactionary actually of me just to say that Furuhashi could be a title winning striker, because there's not it's a fairly small sample size to actually make that claim. But considering the start and how well Edward's been playing with him, I think a lot of people were saying that the Hearts game was Edward's best this season, and it was alongside Furuhashi, so credit to the man from Japan. So I think it definitely could be a case of these guys will lead Celtic to plenty of goals and points that will come from it, because they will just be able to outscore whatever the opposition put forward. And that's really going to come from the three of them up front, especially if the defence is still as culpable.
Well, they'll have quite an interesting tie against AZ Alkmaar. I'm not sure if anybody remembers Bruno Martins Indy in the 2014 World Cup. He was one of the starting centre-halves for Holland. He's at that team now. Another one, Jordi Classy, the holding midfielder, maybe remember him from his Premier League time there. So AZ Alkmaar's defence is quite strong, but interestingly, they don't have Wijndal, the left-back, who prior to the Euros beginning was tipped to be the main left-back for the team. He's a really, really talented player. I think after Badu, the striker, a lot of people tipped him to be the next best player at the club, especially with the talent and potential that he has. But he's currently injured for this one. Even though they dominated the game at the weekend and had 71% of the possession, this is Alkmaar I'm talking about, they still managed to lose that game. Celtic need to be looking at this with a lot of confidence, don't they, thinking that we can dictate the play. Even if they have the ball, they're not going to get anything at them. I wouldn't be surprised, rather, if Celtic play on the counter-attack quite a bit in this game.
I can definitely see it happening. I mean, I took a bit of a look at Wijndal in an article that I wrote for Energy Sport just before the start of the Euros, and I kind of looked into the player a bit, and I really liked what I was reading about him and seeing from him. A really, really attacking, positive influence down that left-hand side, and there's a real source of creativity for Alkmaar. And I think without him and without their main goal scorer, I think it's going to be quite difficult for them. And I think Celtic will probably identify that and be able to sit back, let them have the ball, frustrate them into doing nothing, because they won't be as effective with the ball as they would have been with those two in their team. And then we know how quick their front line can be. We saw it was the first goal that they just ran up the pitch. Furuhashi played in Forrest with a lovely pass. Forrest slotted it across to Edward, and he swept it into the bottom left corner. So there's absolutely opportunity for Celtic to hit on the counter, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them just using that instance of Alkmaar keeping the ball but doing nothing with it to really frustrate the Dutch side. We do have a bit of an update. Celtic do have one back in the women's game. Caitlin Hayes scoring. She scored a free kick from her own half.
Unbelievable, Jeff.
There you go. That's not a bad way to have the deficit. I suppose that's going to inspire a bit.
That's absolutely fantastic. She heard me saying that Claire Shine's goal was excellent and just had to one-up it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you just need to. That's what these players will be seeing. Anything you can do, I can do better. So, still plenty of time. That's only 5 minutes ago in the 63rd. So 20 minutes left first. 3-2. It's absolutely on. If we've called that, then that's a stroke of genius from the pair of us. And what less can you expect at the state of Scottish football, really?
Well, high five through the screens.
Just look nothing but awkward, but that's fine.
Excellent. Well, Celtic will hopefully be looking to score as many goals as they can, but I previously touched on it a little bit earlier. If James McCarthy does get the start to this game, how much of an impact could he make? I know a lot of people were really impressed with Sorrow last season. I thought he was really good, but then I think one of the problems is he gives away so many free kicks. And for a holding midfielder, you talk about tactical fouls, something that Pep Guardiola has been criticised for, but I think there's a difference between a tactical foul and just poor play and just constantly giving away free kicks. And with a Celtic defence that's not that strong at the moment, I think that's the opposite of what they need. So for somebody like James McCarthy's experience, he doesn't have that much experience in Europe, but he's played at a high level, has had injury issues, but I mean, he's done it very well in the Premier League for the past few seasons at Crystal Palace and Everton. Do you think he can come into this defence and, defensive midfield position, it's sort of both really, and just sort of settle the nerves down, even though it will be a potential start for him?
See, I think I would probably be inclined to use McCarthy, especially alongside Callum McGregor, and just have those kind of two cool heads in the middle of the park. And McCarthy's probably culpable to giving away a fair few free kicks, especially during his time at Crystal Palace. We probably can't dance around that at all. But I'd imagine he's much more of a positive influence, and he's an absolute leader, and he will want to be for his boyhood club. And I think him slotting inside Callum McGregor, they're both going to be barking orders. Of course, McGregor, the club captain, and he's been so vocal and up for it since taking on this role. And I think McCarthy's going to be the exact same. He's going to be wanting to get his foot on the gas from the word go in his first outing. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him kind of slot in and have that same kind of leadership role, if just maybe a bit of a sidekick to Cal McGregor's captain. But I think he's probably a better choice, especially when, as you say, the defence has been a bit weaker, especially from set pieces. I mean, we saw against Hearts both times. I think it was the second goal from McKenniff that kind of dropped from a set piece, if I'm correct with that. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong. And then, of course, the Suter header was the same in the opening game of the SPFL weekend. So I think having a more composed figure in the park rather than someone a bit more excitable than Soro might be a clever decision for this tie anyway.
Yeah, I think definitely. I always look at teams now. It's always the spine that I look for, and I feel, if a team's good, they're going to have a good spine, and I feel that's sort of what Celtic are trying to develop here. Another centre half potentially coming in if Welsh can come through. I think they've got a really good spine coming there. Obviously, Joe Hart has arrived as well, who I think's had a good start to the season so far. His Celtic career, I think he's doing well. He's definitely taken the number one jersey away from Barkas or Bain, whoever technically had it. I mean, Barkas wore it, but I don't really know if I would classify him as the number one. But I mean, all of this does come back to Ange Postecoglou, and just how much credit does he deserve for this turnaround in form? Because at the start of the season, a lot of people were writing Celtic completely off, especially even in the Europa League. They thought Jablonek could have been the team to knock Celtic out. It was really that bad for some fans' confidence. But obviously now Celtic are doing really well, and a lot of people are putting them right back in the title race. I think at the start of the season, seldom you may have found about 3 people across Scotland who had tipped Celtic to win the title, and now I think a fair proportion are starting to think, well, they might be able to, and if they can get a good win here against AZ Alkmaar, I mean, any win against AZ Alkmaar is a good win, to be perfectly honest. How much credit does Postecoglou deserve for? It's hard to say turn around because he's only been at the job for a little period of time. And therefore, he's not really had a really bad downward spiral that he's managed to pull the club back from. He's sort of come in and finished the spiral, taken the spiral up that Neil Lennon got down. I'm jumbling up my words here, so I'm going to need you to
I get what you're saying.
Here.
I do get what you're saying. He's kind of swept up Lennon's mess. I think he's not completely dealt with it, but he started the cleaning up process. I suppose that's the kind of adage you were trying to go for.
He's fixing the hole in the ship.
There you go. He's plugging the gaps. Absolutely. I think there's a comment coming in from Terence Pat there saying Celtic should have got Ange in a lot sooner, failed to prepare and prepared to fail. I think there's some truth in that, to be honest. I think if Celtic are doing good now under the short time that Ange's had in the job, imagine what they could have done by getting him in months ago, even while Lennon was on his way out. If they managed to get someone in even sooner, especially Ange, they could have been in a much better position, perhaps could have seen that upturn in form a lot sooner and potentially got themselves a bit of a better position in the league. I know it would have been a bit of an annoyance regardless. It would have been a poor season given that 10 up to Rangers, but he could have potentially saved face a little bit last season. But coming in, he really has started cleaning up the mess, and I think he deserves massive credit because he's got people happy about Celtic again. He's got people excited about the football that they're playing. Of course, it was a lot more turgid and a bit stubborn and just uninspiring under Lennon for large periods of last season. And I think it's a completely different, it's night and day compared to what Postecoglou's putting on. So I think he does deserve a fair bit of credit, absolutely.
Well, he's had no European experience prior to coming to Celtic, and now he's got the chance to make it to the Europa League group stages. He's got an incredibly difficult tie against AZ Alkmaar, but I definitely wouldn't write Celtic off for this one. And at times, I think they could be the favourites when you think about the injuries and the losses that AZ Alkmaar have, the confidence that Celtic have coming into this. I think another significant factor is Celtic have played more, just albeit a few games. They have more minutes under the belts than AZ Alkmaar, and at the end of the day, that could genuinely be the determining factor in this one. But only time will tell. That kicks off later on tonight, and I'm sure many fans of the channel will be paying attention to that one. But we'll switch over to the other side of the old firm here. Rangers are in...
Before we do, Strain, would you like some team news?
Oh, is the team news
from Celtic? Team news has come out from Celtic. We can
Let's talk about James McCarthy, please.
He'll be disappointed. Starting 11 for the Celtic against AZ Alkmaar. Hart starting in goal. We've got Ralston at right back, Welsh and Starfelt in the centre back pairing. Greg Taylor left back as always. It's McGregor and Turnbull that are the names you would imagine are in the holding roles. But then you've got Forrest, Rogic, Abada, and Kyogo. So no Edward tonight. Lyle Abada is back. He's had a pretty good start to things in Europe. I think he's scored in every game. Or potentially didn't score in the second Jablonec game. I can't remember exactly.
I'm not sure if he scored in the second game, but he scored in the 3 prior.
Well, he scored in the 3 prior, and he's hopefully going to make it another scoring performance from him tonight. But how would you see that lining up, especially in the midfield soon? Because you've got McGregor, Turnbull, who you would potentially imagine is going to be further forward, and then Rogic, who is really kind of come back into his own. I've been really happy to see Rogic get a bit more game time on the spotlight to fold under Postecoglou.
I think it's really impressive under Postecoglou. One of the things that a lot of people picked up on when he was first announced was the Australian connection they might have with Tom Rogic. Obviously, Tom Rogic came incredibly close to leaving Celtic to last summer for a good amount of money, but I've always thought he's one of the most talented players in the Scottish Premiership. I think quite a few people would share that view. On his day, he's absolutely phenomenal. He sort of fell away under Neil Lennon. It wasn't quite working out, but Postecoglou has got the best of him. I remember there was a brief spell last season, especially in the game against Aberdeen in the Scottish Cup from the season prior to that. Very confusing. But Tom Rogic was absolutely excellent against Aberdeen. And I thought he was going to kick on from that point, but then he sort of fell away from the team again, and David Turnbull came in. So I think it's a massive credit to have Rogic and Turnbull in the same midfield. And of course, Christie's another one who you could easily see slotting in on one of the wings. So it's definitely credit towards Postecoglou. I think maybe Rogic will sit a little bit deeper, or possibly Turnbull, they might rotate. I'm not sure if it's possibly almost going to be a 4-3-3 with McGregor sort of anchoring it, and then Rogic and Turnbull to roaming it, sort of the same way that Man City have played with De Bruyne and David Silva in the past, just giving them that freedom so long as you've got an anchor sitting back, and I think that'll be Callum McGregor. But it's an exciting team. They really are going with.
It's an attacking team, yeah, definitely. They're really going for it.
We spoke about AZ Alkmaar controlling the possession. I think that's exactly what Celtic can potentially do. That strikes me as a counter-attack idea, potentially, if McCarthy was starting, as I was talking about quite a bit previously. It was maybe more possession-based, holding back. But that's an exciting team, and hopefully it should be a good game to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But
absolutely. Got a couple of comments coming in. Someone saying Rogic has quicker feet than Michael Flatley. That's one I quite enjoy. That's how would you evaluate that, Stu? Would you agree with that? I mean, do you know who Michael Flatley is?
No, do you know what? I don't know. I don't know who that is.
Michael, the Lord of the Dance, Struan. Come on. Oh, that's terrible. That you need to go and educate yourself, Struan. That's oh boy, that's a shocker from you.
That's not good at all. That is. Let's move on quickly, right?
Let's do that.
Let's go to Rangers. I'm sure some of their midfielders have quick feet, and also, but I will need to check out Riverdance. I'll do it straight after this. Quite a few people saying Riverdance in the comments now. Let's go to Rangers. They face Alashkart, the Armenian champions. Of course, they were knocked out of the Champions League by Malmo, despite even in a pretty comfortable position in the second leg. How significant do you think it is that Rangers were knocked out of the Champions League? Because it's the competition that the club have been desperate to get back into for a decade, and to go out so early is just terrible from a fan's point of view, and B, a financial point of view as well.
It is very significant from both angles, Struan. I mean, from the fans' point of view, it was everything they'd kind of been building up to since they kind of came back from their demotion to the lower leagues, and they'd been fighting their way back, and now they're at the point that they can be qualifying for the tournament again. So they've really been dying for those Champions League nights at Ibrox, and they've kind of come and gone in a flash, and not one Rangers fan's going to be happy with that at all. And from a financial side, it's got pretty huge implications. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about what the lack of Champions League money is going to mean for Rangers going forward, and I think it is going to be a worry. There's no coincidence that we're seeing a lot of reports that they're going to need to start offloading players, and potentially that's why they're trying to bring someone into midfield already, because they might be gearing up to sell someone for a fairly decent sum. So I'm not sure. It's not great to see them drop into Europa League from their point of view, especially since they've been fighting their way to that point. But I think it's definitely a tie that they can overcome. And Alashkert, I mean, I know nothing about them whatsoever, but you would have it on paper that Rangers are the more impressive side and probably the higher quality side. But that could me just be feigning ignorance and not having the wherewithal to look into the side that they're facing. But I'd be surprised if I'm proven wrong. I'll say that anyway.
I think in comparison to Celtic, it possibly is the easier of the two ties. That's probably the best team to compare it to in terms of the two Scottish teams. But Rangers haven't made the best start to the season. Of course, they did win on the opening day against Livy, but before their emphatic win against Pars at the weekend, it was 3 straight defeats. Is this a cause for concern for Rangers fans? I know it was a very good win at the weekend, but should they be a little bit concerned given the form that they've shown this season, given they were invincible in the league last season?
Maybe, especially from a domestic standpoint, but I think the best possible thing could have happened on Friday night with that absolutely blistering win over Dunfermline in the Cup. That's going to serve as a lot of things, but first and foremost, it's going to be a confidence builder for them going forward, especially with such a big tie in this one. They really can't really afford to not get through. They really, really need to get through the group stages from this point. And I think having that 5-0 win is going to serve an absolutely massive advantage to them in coming into this game, knowing that this is the side that they can play. This is the football they can play. They can score goals. They can get in behind the defence and they can create chances. So hopefully they see a lot more of that tonight. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, or tomorrow night rather. It's not tonight, it's just Celtic that are playing tonight. So yeah, I think they'll be able to kind of come into this one a bit fresher and a bit more up for it after that win at the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing that we know about Gerrard is his first 2 spells in charge of Rangers domestically weren't the best, but he's always performed in Europe. Rangers have been fantastic. To go out of the Champions League, I think, was a big blow, especially for a lot of the players who, I think a lot of the players have interest from down south. The likes of Leeds have been interested in Ryan Kent. Morelos is a new club linked with him quite often as well. Glenn Kamara, another one, potentially the midfielder we've spoken about. If Bacuna comes in, it could be Kamara who makes waves. So there's a lot of players in that team who their future may be a little bit uncertain now. I think they would have been bagging on having Champions League football to stay at Rangers. But if they don't have that, I'm not going to say a mass exodus because at this stage in the transfer window, I don't think many are leaving. But do you think Rangers could lose a couple of key players here just purely on losing Champions League football?
There's a chance. There's always going to be a chance. I mean, unfortunately, that's the nature of the Scottish game, Stu. I mean, when you do have an excellent player in the Scottish League, there's always going to be a chance that a team from elsewhere in Europe or down south is going to come sniffing and come knocking at the door. I mean, obviously, the most obvious candidate for a potential move away is Alfredo Morelos. I mean, the links to FC Porto over in Portugal have intensified again ever since the knockout from the Champions League. So it's tough to say, especially because it is so close to the end of the window. We've only got 2 weeks left before, as Jim White would say, the window slams shut. But I don't know. It is potentially on the cards that you could see 1, maybe 2 faces leaving Rangers before the end of the window.
Well, I think a really interesting point that's been made by a few Rangers fans is the fact that James Tavernier hasn't quite made the best of starts to the season. He was linked to a plethora of clubs in the world during the summer. I remember Manchester United were interested in him as a potential backup right back. I mean, it's a massive club coming in for him. But Rangers have a really good player, Nathan Patterson, in that position. And quite a few people are wanting him to be given the nod ahead of Tavernier in these games. He was absolutely excellent again at the weekend. Do you think that's a possibility? Even though Tavernier is the captain, there's a few leaders in that Rangers team, but don't need to start naming them all. McGregor being one, I've just named one. But do you think that is a possibility that Nathan Patterson will displace Tavernier? From a Scottish point of view and my selfish point of view, I'd like that to happen because I think he's a really talented player.
No, I completely agree. He's a talented player, and I would love to see him play more from a Scotland perspective. And I think I could see it, to be honest. I think in the next couple of weeks, and Rangers next week, they've got the 2 ties against Alashkert and then Ross County away this weekend coming, which, as viewers of this show will know when they've seen me on here, I don't like Ross County this season based on a number of factors, no less Malky Mackay. So it's these kind of games that I would almost be expecting Gerrard to say, right, faith in the young guys. They've been performing well. Let's see what they can do. Patterson being one and Bassey being the other. Bassey was absolutely fantastic against Dunfermline. And Cameron and I had a chat on Monday about whether it would be the case that these two get a bit more game time. And I think you've got to give way eventually because there's going to be a lot of unrest and a lot of unhappy fans if these guys don't get in the team ahead of the underperforming senior men. Like, it's if Barisic and Tav aren't hitting the heights, why not give it to Bassey and Patterson for a few games?
Yeah, I think definitely. I always like to see the young Scottish players breaking through at teams. And even though James Tavernier is the penalty taker for Rangers, he's the free kick taker, he's the corner taker, I think there's plenty of capable players in that team. And even though, as I said, he's the captain, I just love to see Nathan Patterson be given the chance. And 2 games coming up here, there's a really good opportunity for them to break through. But do you see Rangers going through from this tie against Alashkert?
In a word, yes.
Yeah.
to offer a bit of a longer explanation, it's what I said earlier. I mean, I do see them as the stronger outfit, Rangers, and I think they're going to be buoyed by that 5-0 win at the weekend. And I think I don't want to put from a point on it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the tie kind of over within the first leg this week. So hopefully we see them go through for the coefficient and nothing more, because that's all we're supporting here. We're supporting the coefficient.
Definitely, the coefficient is very important for us, and I hope Rangers can get through for that reason. But at the same time, difficult opposition, you never quite know. I thought they'd get through against Malmo, and it didn't quite work out that way, but they'll get on with it. Another team they've made a really good start to the season, quite the opposite of Rangers, but a really bad result at the weekend was Aberdeen. Obviously, they went out of the League Cup to Wraith Rovers. Do you think this is the perfect opportunity for them to bounce back now? They're playing in the Europa Conference League against Karabag.
It's not going to be an easy tie for them whatsoever. Karabag are a club with European experience, and coming from Azerbaijan, you might not think so, but they've competed in Champions League, Europa League. This is probably a decent level for them, and it's going to be a tough test for Aberdeen. Stephen Glass is absolutely going to be wanting a response, because even if it was a heavily rotated team again from Aberdeen, because he did have an eye on this game, but even still, going out to a team the league below you, it's not going to do anyone any favours, and he was really unhappy with the way that his team went out. So I think he's going to be wanting an instant response, and I think it's a good opportunity for him to get that away in Baku tomorrow night. It's probably the toughest tie for a side in Scotland this week. I'm not really sure. I'd probably have it up the same difficulty as the Alkmaar tie, to be honest. I mean, Karabag, they're a tough team. They've been a tough team to play. And so where Tottenham and the like have competed with that. I definitely see them struggling. I definitely see Aberdeen struggling against them tomorrow, but fingers crossed that they can get the job done with that fresh-faced Lewis Ferguson and Christian Ramirez back after their rest at the weekend.
Definitely. Well, of course, a loss is always bad for a club's mentality, but I think the most significant factor of that loss was Ryan Hedges' injury. Of course, he scored 2 crucial goals in the previous tie against Breidablik. How big a loss could this be for the season? Of course, seeing him on crutches was just devastating to see, even from a neutral point of view.
That's it exactly. I mean, you almost kind of feel the worst, but then when you see it on crutches, you fear it even more. Like that kind of indicates that it could be something really serious, which fingers crossed it won't be for the sake of the league, because he's a fantastic player. He's a really talented player going forward, and I really like watching him whenever I do get the chance. So I think he is going to be a player that Aberdeen will miss, especially in a tie like this where he could potentially make the difference. So yeah, I don't think I'm understating when I say he's a massive loss for the Dons, and hopefully for them he's back as soon as possible.
Well, I'm going to quote here, because Scott Brown said, "We need more from everybody." He's obviously very passionate about this game, and he's getting them brought through. Are these the type of games that Aberdeen brought Scott Brown in for? These big European ties and just the big games in general this season, what he can bring to his side? I'd imagine in the changing room, he is the loudest voice. He's getting everybody up for it, even though some people would argue that Aberdeen are not the favourites going into this one and Karabag should be considered the favourites. How important is it to have a character like Scott Brown? Because I don't think Aberdeen have had that recently.
Well, they've made him club captain for a reason, Struan, haven't they? I mean, it's because of his stature at Celtic over the years. It's because of his importance and his often just his leadership in the biggest European games. I mean, he's come up for Celtic time and time again, and it's no real surprise to see him doing the same for Aberdeen and trying to get not just the team, but the fans and everyone in that stadium absolutely rocking for it. I mean, the return leg at Pittodrie is going to be absolutely massive, regardless of the result tomorrow night. So it's these kind of games that Scott Brown is made for almost. You've seen him thrive in these big games for years now, so wouldn't be surprised to see the exact same happen again tomorrow night.
Definitely. I think one thing Aberdeen will need to do is cut out these defensive blunders. You know, a lot of people have been praising McKenzie and Ramsey at fullback, and they have been absolutely excellent. But in that heart of the defence, I feel Aberdeen are almost the masters of their own downfall. You know, we've seen McCrory giving away penalties, Joe Lewis making mistakes. How vital is it that they cut these out? That's something that Scott Brown, you know, will be saying to them, just play it safe, play it easy, don't take risks, because at the end of the day, you can't afford to slip up at all in these type of ties. Any missed kick of the ball can give away a goal. How important is it that Aberdeen just cut these defensive errors? It's easier said than done, of course. During a match, anything can happen, and I'm not one to talk. I'm not a professional footballer, but from the Aberdeen point of view and Stephen Glass's point of view, how much will Aberdeen need to cut these out?
Well, I mean, I'll say it as well just now, Struan, in case it wasn't obvious by the absolute unit that I am also not a professional footballer, so I can't speak from experience here. But it is harder said than done, and it can take a lot of time, because especially if you are kind of nervous coming in, your confidence might be knocked, and I think that can be what it comes down to a lot of the time. You might just be a bit too nervous coming into a game, and you might just make a mistake based on the fact that you kind of only see one option. You've got that tunnel vision. You see a ball done in your box. Your only kind of thought is, oh, Jesus, I really need to clear this. You take the swipe with the leg and you take the man as well, and that ends up being a penalty. So I think just having that element of composure is really going to serve Aberdeen well, and that's especially where players like Brown are going to be able to instill that into their kind of younger teammates, the likes of McKenzie and Ramsey. So I think once these mistakes do get cut out, and they're not as consistent, they're not just constantly happening, it's not a absolute dumpster fire at the back, nothing of the sort. But once these mistakes are cut out, I think we could see a much more solidified Aberdeen team, and one that could really be pushing themselves right up the league, and hopefully through the European group stages as well.
Yep, definitely. Well, just to touch on Aberdeen finally there, how significant is European football to the club? Obviously, we've spoken previously about how they had a big interest in Martin Boyle, and potentially with European football, they'd be able to attract him away from Hibs. But Martin Boyle, of course, has stayed at Hibs. But there's plenty of other examples across Scottish football who may be attracted to Aberdeen for the European football. And for a team like Aberdeen, it's just massive to have European football, to be perfectly honest. This Conference League has given us a massive opportunity to have more Scottish representation across Europe.
And it's great. Like that's what we want to see from a Scottish standpoint, just as much representation from us across Europe as we can possibly have. And I think this competition has come at the perfect time for Aberdeen. I feel like Aberdeen were in danger of a club just getting absolutely lost in what they wanted to be. If they wanted to be just the third place team in Scotland, or if they wanted to try and break apart the old firm or push up into a champions position themselves, I feel like this competition is providing them with a real opportunity for growth and an opportunity for something to build on and build towards. They can see this competition as a legitimate way of representing themselves and pushing themselves forward, and rightly so. It's exactly why the competition was made, to have these clubs have something to aim for and have these more menial clubs. And I say that in terms of the whole of Europe. I mean, you're not exactly going to be having someone like Real Madrid begging and praying to get into the Europa Conference League, but for someone like Aberdeen, who has European history, it's a good way of potentially getting themselves back to that level again. I know it's not going to be anywhere near easy for Aberdeen to get to the level of European pedigree that they were before our lifetime, Struan, but it can act as a placeholder, and it can act as something to aim for, which I think is really important for Aberdeen right now.
Definitely. No, I'm gonna fire the same question slightly in a different way here about St Johnstone, the final team we're going to touch on, who'll be playing on Thursday as well against LSK, who finished fourth in the Austrian League. And I think St Johnstone have been fantastic. You know, they only got the first win of the season at the weekend in the League Cup, but over the two legs against Galatasaray, they were absolutely phenomenal. You know, they may have lost, but they were just a joy to watch. To be honest, the entirety of Scotland seemed to be behind them. Just looking at my social media feeds, it was just littered with them. And just how big is that for St Johnstone to have this sort of support? Because they are the underdogs. You know, we need to get this right. I know they won the 2 domestic cups last season, but I don't think anybody really fancied them to go far in Europe. But they are here. They've got a massive chance to get in European group stage football.
It's just going to be absolutely massive. I think if we saw McDiarmid Park as amped up as it was for the Galatasaray leg, imagine what it's going to be for the LASK. To provide them with great football, I think it's going to be absolutely huge. It's going to be rocking, and I think it's just so unifying, not only for their own fans but for the country as well, to an extent. I mean, you're always going to have your biases and your allegiances, but for the majority of neutrals, it's been absolutely great to see. Great to see St Johnstone kind of start building, and it's a really kind of likeable team as well. I mean, Cam Davidson's really implemented a sense of resilience and heart within the St Johnstone team, and that's why we saw them lift the 2 cups. So I think European football is even going to just enhance that even more, and it's going to get more people behind them, because even though we're all kind of wanting the Scottish teams to do as well in Europe as we can, someone like St Johnstone, you're almost going to be supporting them. As like I say, it's a weird thing to say, and I know a lot of people might not potentially agree with what I've got to say on that, but it is almost like supporting another team, which is odd, which is an odd feeling, but at the same time you almost don't feel guilty for it, because you see them doing so well. You've not really got any bad memories of them, and it's just kind of what they've deserved after the last the last season in Scotland with Callum Davidson.
Yeah, definitely. They're just a joy to watch, to be honest. I think everybody likes to see them doing well, and I'm sure everybody would love them to get past LASK. Do you have any thoughts on LASK? They finished fourth in the Austrian league. I remember a couple of seasons ago watching them against Manchester United in the Europa League. The first leg they were beaten 5-0, but in the second leg they gave a really good account of themselves.
If I'm being completely honest, I don't really know an awful lot about LASK, bar what you've just said in terms of they've been able to compete against some of the bigger teams in Europe, like Manchester United, and that they had a fairly decent showing last year in Austria. I think it's absolutely going to be a tough game for St Johnstone. I mean, there's no dancing around that, but I don't know. It's a tough one. It is a really tough one to nail down on, because, as I say, I don't know an awful lot about the team. So all I'm hoping for is a really decent result for St Johnstone, and hopefully something that they can take back to McDermott Park next week.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the main thing with LASK is the experience that they have in Europe is possibly what they'll be riding on to get them through this tie that they have over St Johnstone. But as we've seen with St Johnstone, never write them off. They were absolutely incredible last season, even though they lost. I think they can be proud of that Galatasaray result. Doesn't matter that they lost. They were absolutely excellent. They went to Turkey and got a 1-1 draw. A lot of people would say, once again, that LASK, as I mentioned, with the experience, would be the favourites. But I think the Saints can do it. Do you think they can?
Mm-hmm. I'd like to think so. I mean, what we saw, they do have players that can absolutely boss this level. I mean, Ali McCann was outstanding across the both legs against Galatasaray, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him do the same again. And they're going to have Chris Kane fresh. He didn't play at the weekend in the 2-2 draw. That might play into it a little bit, the fact that they had to go to extra time against Arbroath in the League Cup round of 16. But they did have kind of some rotation, so hopefully they're all going to be all right for tomorrow night's game. Just before you move on, Struan, it's unfortunately a loss for Celtic FC women in the Champions League. They do have one more game to go against Minsk in Norway on Saturday, so hopefully the tide turns a bit better for them in that one.
Yeah, definitely. Do you know, a 2-1 is not even the terrible result, to be honest. Levante are a really good side, and I think Celtic showed a lot of heart there in the second leg, to be honest, to be able to stay within that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think that's a really good performance from Celtic, to be perfectly honest there. But with St Johnstone, they can do it. We'd love them to. I'm going to be a bit negative here, but if St Johnstone do get eliminated at this stage, do you think that the vultures could start to circle that team? You mentioned Ali McCann, excellent. McCart's been another one. Kerr, even Xander Clark potentially has had a few suitors. Callum Davidson, another one. Do you think there's a few worries that a few big teams could come in for St Johnstone players if they do get eliminated from Europe?
I think the worries are already there, to be honest. I mean, there's been a lot of speculation surrounding the likes of McCann and McCart potentially being tempted away, and I think they're only going to be enhanced if St Johnstone do fail to get through. But it's going to be tough to see, because, as we've already mentioned in this episode, Struan, there's not an awful lot of time left in the window to get business done, be it incomings or outgoings. So I don't know. I feel like it could be quite difficult for them to replace these players if they do go, which is going to make keeping a hold of them even more important. And I feel like these kind of players, they're the types of players that will respect that, and they'll probably do as best they can to stick around unless an absolutely monumental offer comes in that the club kind of is forced into accepting something. Say if they get offered 7 figures for Ali McCann, I wouldn't be surprised to see him heading out the door. I'll put it that way. So, yeah, there's opportunity for teams to come in for them, but there already have been, and they've kind of stuck around this much so far. So hopefully they don't all jump ship as soon as if they drop out of Europe, not as soon as they drop out of Europe, because we want to remain positive. Well, as positive as possible.
Definitely. Well, I can definitely see people coming in for Ali McCann. He's absolutely fantastic. But I'm afraid that's all we've got time for here tonight on Wednesday on the State of Scottish Football. I'd like to join Jack for joining me tonight.
Absolutely, mate. Thank you very much for filling in for Sean. It's been a pleasure having you here on Wednesday.
It's no problem. You'll be gutted to know Sean will probably be back next Wednesday, so it won't be me again. But I'm sure we'll meet again on one of these nights. We'll be back again.
We can
only dream. Touch wood. We'll be back again tomorrow night with a reaction show to all the results of the Scottish teams in Europe. I will be there, and we'll possibly be on later again, so be sure to keep an eye on that. Axon will be here again, though, tonight with the reaction to Celtic against AZ Alkmaar. Thanks again for watching.